Alright, now we're on to page 20, the clutch bell assembly. These are the parts out of bag 2 to put that assembly together. The last thing in that bag is it's a plate and some screws and brass washers and spacers and stuff to remount the sensor for the CDI unit. And we're not to the engine yet, so go ahead and set this aside, make sure you don't lose it, and we'll get to that here in a little bit. So now, here we got the clutch bell, start shaft, some spacers, the hex adapter, pinion, and some bearings and stuff. So go ahead and look at your manual, page 20, and let's get this together, and we'll take a look at it when it's done. Okay, here we have our completed clutch bell assembly. Some things to take note of while you're doing this. Make sure you get this pinion screwed down nice and tight, and put a little bit of red Loctite on there. You don't need a lot, just enough to kind of hold it in there. After the engine runs a bit, it'll pretty much tighten up itself, but you just want to get it for the initial start. When you slide the start shaft up through and mount the hex adapter on the top, you want to kind of squeeze these down a little bit, but you don't want them too tight, but you definitely don't want any play in this shaft at all. So just take care when you're setting that up. Make sure you get the right tension and everything on there. For now, I've just gone ahead and put the screws in here to hang on to them because we're not ready to put this into the frame yet. So that's really about it. It's a pretty simple assembly. So let's move on to the next step. We're going to start preparing the engine to get installed into the frame now. Okay, we're going to get ready to start getting this engine prepped up to be put into the airframe now. Part of the addendums has a nylock nut in there to aid in getting this off. Basically what it does is you put it on here and it locks these two nuts together and it allows you to spin that shaft off of the crankshaft with the prop adapter. Then what you're going to do is thread that back in just a little bit and secure this into a vise, and then just kind of beat down on the shaft and to beat that prop adapter off. Just take care when you're doing it. It doesn't take a whole lot of force. If it feels like it's too stiff or too tight or something like that, maybe put a little bit of heat, get a little bit of heat going there on the prop adapter to get it to come off a little easier. We want to be careful. We are going to be beating down onto the crankshaft, so we don't want to disturb any of the bearings or hurt any of the bearings while we're doing that. So just take care and use a little bit of common sense. Another thing you might want to do, we have to remount this sensor for the CDI anyway, so before you start beating on this, it might be a good idea to go ahead and take that off of there. That way you don't have to get a stray hammer blow or something like that and bust it up. So we'll go ahead and get everything off. Another thing to take note of too, inside here is a wood drift key. You'll see a picture of it in the manual. It's right here on the manual, and as you can see, it's on the shaft here. So just pay attention when you're doing this that you don't lose that key. If you lose that key, you're going to have to order another one. So we'll go ahead and get the prop adapter off here and continue on. Alright, here we go. We got everything apart now. Got the prop adapter off. Mine's still kind of a little hot there. I had to put a little heat to it. And there's the prop adapter shaft. So here's the little wood drift key that we want to hang on to. And here you can see now we got a bare crankshaft to go ahead and mount up everything onto. So we're going to go ahead and do that. I'll get everything out of the packages and we'll take a look at it and get it all mounted. Alright, and here's all the stuff we're going to need to do page 22. We got our fan shroud, we got our clutch, our fan hub and clutch belt, or our fan hub. We're going to need the wood drift key from the previous step. Here's the plate that goes on top of the engine here. There's some brass spacers that they call out to put in the manual or put in here. I don't use these. You may need them, you may not need them. It's just going to be on a per installation type thing. So I start off without them, and then just kind of after everything's mounted up, and if it looks like I need them, I'll come back later and put them in. But typically you'll find you don't need these spacers. Also in that bag is the arm for the throttle arm for the carburetor. We don't have the carburetor on yet. I'm not going to put that on for a little bit yet, so we'll go ahead and get that set aside, and then your screws and everything to get everything mounted down. Now, when you when you do this, you know, just put a little bit of red Loctite in here. Get a little bit of red Loctite in with the hub when you mount the clutch down. Everything will pretty much, you know, tighten up once you get it started up and run it through a few times. But we just want to make sure that it's in there tight and for the first initial start. So don't get crazy with it because you may need to take it apart later. All right, we'll go ahead and get everything put back together, and we'll come back and take a look at it. Oh, and another thing to note here: we do not need this back plate here on the engine, so we can go ahead and take that off as well. Alright, now we got everything together here for the engine. We got the fan shroud on, clutch, bell, fan, and everything like that. Another good idea while you're working on this stuff is don't do it while you might be spinning the crankshaft, but get some paper towel or something, stuff into the portholes, the carburetor and exhaust port, just to you know, make sure we don't get any dirt or anything in there. Now, getting this clutch crank down, it's a little tricky. There's a couple of ways you can go about it. There's tools out there that you can get that will seat in here. I just made my own. It's nothing but an aluminum bar with a couple of bolts through it at the same spacing as those two slots to get in there, and then I can just hang on to it and give it a little crank. It doesn't need to be super tight, just tight enough to get past, to allow it to get past the compression on the engine for the first couple of starts. Again, after it's, you know, you run through a couple of tanks, it's going to tighten itself up. So you just want to make sure, you know, the first time you start it, you don't spin the clutch off with the starter, or, you know, or if you're using a pull starter, it's not that big a deal. You probably won't run into that problem. So now we got that done. We're going to be, we'll mount the, I'm not going to go ahead and mount the carburetor and the sensor yet. I'm going to go ahead and leave those off. It just make it easier while I'm going through the build and videoing it. That way I don't have the extra pieces sticking off there. But that's the next page. We'll go over that a little bit later. It's pretty straightforward. Another thing I'd like to mention too, there is a, before you mount this fan, if you're going to use a governor that needs a separate magnet, you might want to consider going ahead and putting it in now at this, well, you're going to want to put it in at this point before you put the shroud on and everything. So go ahead and get that on there. If you're going to use something like the RevMax limiter, RevMax governors, or Throttle Jockey Pros, or the Spectrum AR7100, you can use a Spectrum backplate sensor, and it will trigger off of the magnet that they have in there for the CDI right now. So it's just a simple matter of fabbing up a little bracket to hold the sensor, and it'll just pick up the magnet. So, you know, if you're going to run a governor or anything of that nature, now, you know, before you complete this step, this is the time to get it put in. Alright, so next up will be mounting the engine up into the airframe. So let's go ahead and we'll get stuff ready for that, and we'll get it put back together.